Hi there, welcome to 60 Matthews. I'm Matthew, and today we're talking about my favorite show of all time, Boston Legal. And even though this show ended over a decade ago, I think it's still very much relevant to today. Now, I struggle to call Boston Legal my favorite show of all time because honestly, it shares that position with the show South Park. Both of these shows achieve the same results, and the way they get there is somewhat similar, but these two shows are completely different. At some point, I will definitely be doing a video on South Park, but today we're talking about Boston Legal. The reason why I bring up South Park in the first place is because both of these shows utilize the same tactic of looking at an issue, looking at both sides, and showing the stupidity of the extremes of both of these sides. They show that these issues are rarely black and white. They're usually somewhere in the gray area where most people live. And whereas South Park usually just goes for the joke, Boston Legal covers the entire spectrum of emotions. Boston Legal is technically a drama, I guess, although it's a lot more comedic than most dramas. Like, the main story of every episode is usually some type of murder trial, or at least some kind of sad or frightening case. But the B and C stories are usually the most compelling stories to me. They're funny, they're thought-provoking, and a lot of times they show a character that you've probably never seen on regular television before. One of the main recurring characters has Asperger's, and so it's really interesting to see his character develop over the series. Another main recurring character is a crossdresser who becomes this female persona because he himself is such a shy individual. And it's amazing to watch this shy character grow out of his shell and gain some confidence and grow as a human being. So, on the topic of these quirky characters, I should explain up front that the show definitely has its flaws. Life was a little different back in 2004 when the show aired, and things were a lot less politically correct. A lot less politically correct. And to be honest, that's kind of one of my favorite parts about the show, because the show doesn't claim to be the beacon of justice. If anything, it shows that these big, powerful, seemingly heroic people are pretty messed up. I mean, the two main characters are very misogynistic. They're both womanizers and they objectify pretty much every woman on the show. But several times throughout the show, they explore that. They explain that he was a victim of statutory rape at the age of like 12 or 14, and so they delve into what's really going on with him. Another example of this like sticky gray area is when Alan Shore has to defend this woman who he knows murdered someone. He knows that she murdered someone because she comes up to him before she murders this person and says, "So the man who murdered my daughter got off on temporary insanity. So how can I murder this person and get away with temporary insanity?" And Alan Shore is like, "That's not how this works. You can't do that." And so she does it, and he has to defend her. It's a great example because Alan Shore, and inherently you as the audience, start to sympathize with this woman and start to say, well, I kind of want to see her win this case. Even though everyone in this situation knows that this case is, as Alan Shore puts it, premeditated as hell. And at the end of the episode, he's talking to his best friend about his feelings about the case on the balcony. And I'll get to the balcony in just a minute. It's a very important part of the show. But he's talking about his turmoil over this case and actually wanting to see this woman get away with it. Now, I should point out that Alan Shore is more of the liberal, democratic character, and his best friend Denny Crane is more of a Republican, conservative character. And even though the very moral Alan Shore is talking about how he doesn't think that murder is okay, he wants to defend her. And his best friend Denny Crane hits him with, because deep down you think there's some justice in the death penalty. An eye for an eye, he flat out murdered her daughter and got away with it, so she should have a right to murder him and get away with it. Now, obviously, this is a very intense and deep issue, and you're not going to find the answers to this issue in a TV drama. But we should at least acknowledge these feelings and really question ourselves and say, well, I said I felt this way, but now I'm kind of feeling this other way, and figure out what that is. This show is not trying to say that one side is right over the other. In fact, there's another episode when Alan Shore, over the course of the series, befriends the man with Asperger's, Jerry Espenson. Alan starts out as a kind of mentor to Jerry, and kind of teaches him how to be a real lawyer. And one of the best pieces of advice Alan gives to Jerry is to get out of this field. Because it's not a battle of good and evil. It's about who can win on the battlefield. Because Jerry is an absolutely moral human being, and Alan Shore knows that that does not make a good lawyer. And later on in the series, Alan Shore exploits Jerry's Asperger's and destroys him in the courtroom, even though Alan is definitely not on the good side of this case. So at its core, this show never says this is what you should believe, this is what is right, and this is what is wrong. Every single episode exhibits some kind of case that's not so black and white, and they explore the nuances of the case. There's an episode where Alan Shore defends a man and his two wives who have a perfect family unit. They have happy, intelligent, well-fed children, and they each know their place in the household, and it's a perfect little family. And even though everyone in the courtroom, including the judge, concede that this is a great family, according to the law, he still has to break them up. And even though I don't believe in polygamy, it did make me question how much should we allow the law to govern our married lives. I watched an episode the other night where the 16-year-old got sexually groped by her rabbi, and she wanted to take this miracle pill that made her completely forget about the incident. Her father was a psychiatrist, and he had used it with great success on many PTSD patients. So her father and she were for her taking the pill, and her mother was against it, and she was defended by the main firm of the show. At one point, they bring into question who we are as human beings. There are many theories that try to define who we are, but one of the more prominent theories is that we are a culmination of our experiences. And if we were able to just take a pill, especially one that was fed to us by the pharmaceutical companies, and forget about all the bad stuff that happened to us, then who would we be then? I could go on and on and on about all of the interesting cases that this show explores. But instead, I'll move on to my last point, the balcony. Something like 90 to 95% of the episodes ended on a balcony with Alan Shore and Denny Crane having a conversation with each other. The show doesn't really have any main characters, but if it did, these would be the two. And there was something magical and familiar about the balcony. The show itself is pretty bombastic. There's these like loud, jazzy, funky interludes in between all the scenes. There's a lot of shouting sometimes. Denny Crane shoots one of his mini guns a lot of times throughout the series. But the balcony is quiet. It's just two dudes sitting on some chairs, looking up at the night sky, drinking scotch and smoking cigars, and talking about the day. And what I mean by it being familiar is that it's something that you don't really see in today's world of television. Nobody gathers around the television anymore. Whenever Boston Legal was in its prime and airing on television, I was in high school, and no matter how much homework I had that night, which was probably a lot, I put it aside to make sure that I watched Boston Legal with my dad. And not only was it great to have some father-son bonding time, it was great to talk about the episode afterwards and talk about how we felt and what we thought and what we concluded. And whenever it came to the balcony scene, it was this comfortable, familiar feeling, almost like home. It was the safe place that you could always return to. I think it was the same thing that was present in Cheers, whenever Norm would walk into the bar and everyone wanted to hear what quippy greeting he had this week. It's the same exact thing that was present in Central Perk whenever all of us wanted to see the friends sitting around in their lounge area, talking about their antics and throwing jokes back and forth. And it's the same exact thing whenever we all wanted to see the Booth and McLarens and watch Ted, Marshall, Lily, Robin, and Barney get into the same antics and copy that trope. There was just this familiar feeling where we were able to tune out the crazy world around us and go to this nice and comforting, funny place. And no matter what was going on behind us, we could be happy and at home in the television. And in today's world of the streaming wars and binging, it's just not the same experience of everybody gathering around once a week and returning to that place together. And whereas in Cheers and Friends and How I Met Your Mother, in these familiar places, occasionally they would talk about real issues, but for the most part, it was just the stage in which these crazy stories were set. And the balcony on Boston Legal stood in direct contrast to that. The quietness of the balcony allowed for meditation on these subjects. It allowed you time to internalize a lot of what you concluded for yourself throughout the episode, and not just say, well, I saw it on a TV show once. And the reason why I'm doing this video this week is because while Alan Shore was a Democrat and Denny Crane was a Republican, no matter their differences, they were able to have a civil conversation. There were times whenever they were very much at odds, and yet they were able to have a civil conversation to talk about their issues, and even if they disagreed, they could still be friends. And I think in today's world and today's political climate, that's very necessary. But that's all I have for this week. I really hope you check out Boston Legal sometime, but more importantly, I hope that when you face an issue, you look at it from every angle. You see both sides, even if it feels kind of wrong, explore that and see what's wrong about it. Don't just snap to conclusions, don't just read a headline and say, well, that sounds like how I feel. Truly explore these issues, and that's how we can grow as human beings. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.